The rapture is a controversial issue, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. And we're going to be talking about a shadow, in a sense, in Genesis chapter 35 that alludes to a pre-tribulation rapture, or at least that's the way that I'm going to be presenting it to you. Now, obviously, this is a secondary thing, has nothing to do with how to know for sure you can get to heaven, which is the most important thing, which the gospel can be found in 1 Corinthians 15. But we're going to be talking about a shadow in the Old Testament, specifically in Genesis chapter 35, and how this pertains to a pre-tribulation rapture. And it's pretty cool. This is something that I was just discovering, or that I just discovered because I am currently studying the book of Genesis. And I have already covered Genesis 35, but I was revisiting it. I can't remember exactly why, but I'm glad I did. And so now I'm going to show you what I just saw. But in Genesis chapter 35, we learn about Rachel, and we see that Rachel labored, and we are told that she has hard labor. And then even in verse 17, it says hard labor again. But verse 18 is where I want to kind of focus on. In verse 18, it says, "And so it was as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin." And so the idea of what's going on here is right as Rachel is dying, she has a son and she names him something. And then after she dies, the father names him something different. So Rachel names him Ben-Oni and the father names him Benjamin. Now, Ben-Oni means son of my sorrow, and Benjamin means son of my right hand. And those names are important to remember as we go throughout this video. But a key in this is right here in the blue where it says, as her soul was departing. We'll come back to that. But first, let's talk about this labor that she was having. Now, if you're a student of the Bible, you are aware that labor is often connected to the tribulation period. And so here in Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 6, it says, "Whether a man is ever in labor with child, so why do I see every man with his hands on his loins like a woman in labor? And all faces turned pale. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it, and it is the time of Jacob's trouble." So it's that day, in yellow, that day that's being talked about is the time of Jacob's trouble, and there is none that is like it. So you see labor, and it's all being connected to that day, which is referring to the time of Jacob's trouble, specifically the Great Tribulation time period. We see this again in Matthew 24, where Jesus is talking, and he says that you're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. You're going to have nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom. But then down here in verse 8, he says, all these are the beginning of sorrows. And then right after you see that word sorrows, in the very next verse, it says, then they will deliver you up to tribulation. And so I want you to pay attention to the word sorrows there. The word sorrows in Greek has the idea of pain of childbirth, travail pain, birth pangs. Down here, intolerable anguish, in reference to the dire calamities precede the advent of the Messiah. So this childbirth, this labor pains, is something that is going to be building up and building up and building up and building up. And it's all going to be taking place before Jesus returns, before the second coming of Jesus Christ. In John chapter 16, verse 20, Jesus is talking here, and he says, "Most assuredly I say to you that you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. And you will be sorrowful, but your sorrow will be turned into joy." He continues on, he says, "A woman, when she is in labor, has sorrow, because her hour has come. But as soon as she has given birth to the child, she no longer remembers the anguish for joy that a human being has been born into the world. Therefore, you now have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and your joy no one will take from you. And in that day you will ask me nothing." Now let's talk about what we just read. In verse 20, he says, your sorrow will be turned into joy. And then in the very next verse, he says, a woman, when she is in labor, has sorrow. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because if you look at the woman that Jesus is talking about, he just, it's just a generalization, a woman. But if you put Rachel right here, Rachel had a child, and Rachel named him Ben-Oni, which was sorrow, and then the father named him Benjamin. So you have sorrow, Ben-Oni, and then he was renamed son of my right hand. And so this is why it's so interesting, because this woman, if this woman is Rachel, she first has sorrow. She gives birth. Right as she dies, she gives birth. And right as the child comes into the world, her soul departs. It's almost happening simultaneously. And that is important to understand. Now, within this typology, you have Rachel and you have Leah. Those are the two wives of Jacob. Now, I believe that Leah represents Israel, and I believe that Rachel represents the church. And so if Rachel represents the church, and Leah seems to represent Israel because she's the firstborn, and she had very poor eyesight, as it seems, which is very it parallels what's going on with Israel, because Israel is spiritually blinded. Israel is still spiritually unseen, in a sense, similar to how Leah was as well. And so you have all different kind of connections there. But if you look at Rachel as being a picture of the church, you see her giving birth, and right at the same moment, within the same moment as Rachel's soul departing from her, is the same time that the child was entering in. And that is a big deal, because what this is painting a picture of is that we're seeing Rachel departing right as the tribulation enters in, because she gave birth to a boy whose name was Ben-Oni, that she named it Ben-Oni, which is sorrow, son of my sorrow. And so she's birthing sorrow. And the reason why she's birthing sorrow is because from the church's point of view, she knows that there's the tribulation right around the corner. That's what the church knows. The church is very aware of a future judgment that's right around the corner that you and I refer to as the tribulation. And so right as Rachel is dying, she is giving birth to the sorrow, and her soul is departing simultaneously. And so I need you to understand how amazing that is, because what this is basically teaching us is that if the pre-tribulation rapture is correct, which I believe it is, this is showing us that Rachel, the church, gives birth to sorrow, the tribulation, simultaneously. And so what this basically is saying is that the rapture is going to occur right about the same time that this child is born, and right after the child is born, that is sorrow. So right as soon as sorrow enters into the world, the church is taken away. And so this is all given back here in Genesis chapter 35, and it says, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name son of my sorrow. Now here where it gets interesting, because sorrow turns into joy. Sorrow turns into joy, which is what we read earlier in John chapter 16. Here you have a woman, when she is in labor, she has sorrow because her hour has come, but as soon as she has given birth to the child, she no longer remembers the anguish for joy that a human being has been born into the world. And so when you think of Benjamin, just Benjamin the person, I need you to understand that Benjamin seems to be representation of the second coming. Joseph and Benjamin seem to be types. Joseph seems to represent the first coming of Jesus Christ. Benjamin seems to represent the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so when you think about Benjamin representing the second coming of Jesus Christ, it makes a lot of sense, because his name was Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow, and it turns into Benjamin, which was named by the father. So Rachel names him son of my sorrow, so the church recognizes the tribulation is going to come first. And then after the tribulation, you have Benjamin, which is talking about the second coming, or son of my right hand. The son of my right hand is what Benjamin means. And after tribulation, after the 7 years of tribulation, in Psalm chapter 16, verse 11, it says, you will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. And then here it is, at your right hand. At your right hand. What does Benjamin mean? The son of my right hand. At your right hand. At the son of my right hand. Benjamin, the son of my right hand. The son of your right hand. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. And that is incredible. So right as Rachel is dying, her soul is leaving her body. And as her soul is leaving her body, it's going away. She names her child Ben-Oni to talk about the tribulation. So the church, Rachel represents the church. So the church is departing right as soon as the tribulation is entering. And so again, this is just my opinion, but I believe that this is pointing to a pre-tribulation rapture. And there are all kinds of types and shadows all the way back in the book of Genesis that you could keep on talking about, just like how Lot, the angels couldn't destroy Sodom and Gomorrah until Lot was taken out of the city. You can just make a whole list of these things, but this is all secondary. But I hope this edifies you.